everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Today I have another recent reads wrap-up for you, covering the length of time that I unexpectedly took a break from BookTube. So I have the first part of this recent reads wrap-up linked down below, covering the books I read around Halloween time. So if you're looking for some spooky recommendations, that is a good video to watch. This covers the length of time from around Thanksgiving to Christmas. So I wasn't reading as much, but I still have a good amount of books to go through with you. I do have one DNF that we'll start with, and then I will go in the order of my enjoyment. So starting with the books I liked the least, all the way up to the book I loved the most. So let's start with the DNF though. Unfortunately, this was kind of a shocker to me, a little bit, I will say, and that is The Blind King's Wrath by Ashok K. Banker. This is the third and final book in the what's the actual series name? It starts with Upon a Burning Throne, and it is this Indian-inspired fantasy that I loved the first two books in. I think that this series was originally intended to be like 10 books long, like a really long epic series, and unfortunately, I think with the performance and sales of the first book, the first couple books, I think unfortunately the author had to wrap things up in a much shorter length of time and make this a trilogy instead. And unfortunately, that took away some of my motivation to be really invested in this world and in these characters, because I know that the original intent was to make this so much more epic in scale. And this is the shortest book by far of the trilogy. The other two books are quite lengthy. And the problem was, I think, that I left so much time in between reading each of the books. So Upon a Burning Throne follows a certain set of characters in this world. The second book follows a different set of characters that you hear about in the first book but don't really follow as closely. So you kind of take a break from the first book's characters to follow the new characters, and then the third book kind of wraps it all together. And not having had the characters in this book since reading the first book, I completely forgot like a lot of where we left off with them and what was going on with the world and who was who. And it's been a while since I've read that first book. So quickly I found myself confused and not invested, and I was thinking about other things while reading this one and was just like, no, this is such a bummer because I really enjoyed the first two books. And I was about 100 pages in to a 400-page book and was just not enjoying it. And was like, well, if I'm not enjoying it yet, and this is only 400 pages, then I don't think this is going to be worth it. So maybe eventually I will reread the first two books and then read this one, but I don't see that happening for a long time just because of the amount of books I want to read on my TBR. So this is one that I sadly had to put down. The next book I have to talk about, I gave 3 out of 5 stars, and that is Red Tigress by Amelie Zhao. This is the sequel to Blood Heir, and I really enjoyed Blood Heir. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It reminded me a lot of the Shadow and Bone trilogy, the Grisha verse by Leigh Bardugo, because it's kind of this Russian-inspired fantasy world, and you kind of have this chosen one with powers they have to hide, and then they're hunted for their powers. So it reminded me a lot of that Grisha trilogy. And I really enjoyed it because it felt kind of like a more mature Grisha trilogy. I found the writing style and the characters much more mature in Blood Heir, so I really enjoyed it. The problem is this second one kind of took that maturity and sophistication that I found the first one had and kind of threw it out the window, because you get the villain of this story slowly starts to kind of come more into focus, And they are the most mustache twirling villain that is so obnoxiously immature. Like, the dialogue was so cringy at times. It just got to be so over the top that I was like totally losing interest by the end of it. And it only kind of got worse and worse as it went on, where the ending was kind of like the cringiest part, where I was like, no. So it's not even like my enjoyment increased as I was reading the book. It was the opposite. So I don't think I'm going to continue with this series, unfortunately, which is a bummer because I really enjoyed that first book, and will pick up this author's newest book that's coming out this year because I've already heard some early really good buzz about that one, and that it's like more mature. It's kind of on the older end of YA fantasy, and I can see how this author could lean towards that, especially with Blood Heir. I think that that was kind of on the older end of YA fantasy. So I'm very curious to check out their newest book, but yeah, unfortunately I am DNFing this series. I did finish this book, but I am DNFing the series. All right, the next book I have is the Book of Gothel by Mary McMyne. So this, if you can see from the cover, kind of markets itself as a Rapunzel retelling from the perspective of Gothel, the villain of the Rapunzel story. And it is not that. It's not that at all. It does follow Gothel, who is the villain, but it does not follow the Rapunzel story at all. It follows Gothel's childhood, coming of age story, and why she is the way she is, then explains more of her side of the story. I really liked the writing style in this one. It had this very fairy tale-like quality about it, and I really liked Mother Gothel's story for the most part. The ending of this one, I have very, very mixed feelings on, and I can't really talk about it without spoilers, so I'll just leave it at, I think that this ending will have very mixed reception. It did not work for me personally, but I think that the rest of the story was really fascinating, beautiful, had really beautiful themes, and I really liked where the story was heading. I just was disappointed with the ending. If you like stories like Spinning Silver and Uprooted and maybe The Bear and the Nightingale, like that kind of writing style, I think that this writing will really work for you. But do not go in expecting a Rapunzel retelling. It is definitely following Mother Gothel, but just her life prior to ever meeting Rapunzel. You do get a little bit of it at the end, but not much, and not enough for it to be called a Rapunzel retelling. So I think that the cover is quite misleading because it literally has the Rapunzel hair on it. The next 3 books I have are all 4.5-star books. So I didn't have any 5 stars, but the fact that I had 3 4.5 stars makes this a very good wrap up. So I'll start with the one, I guess that's the lowest of the 4.5 stars, and it is Window Shopping by Tessa Bailey. I was so in the mood for some cutesy Christmas romances and just wanted all of those cozy Christmas feelings. I was not feeling very in the spirit this year, so was looking for some stories to like get me there, and I think that this one did a good job. This Window Shopping follows a girl who is coming out of a pretty long stint in prison and is trying to kind of get back on her feet, and has always wanted to be a window dresser, and gets this opportunity at this really luxury department store to be their window shopper, and ends up having a budding romance with her boss. And I thought that the boss-employee dynamic, I could see that, how if you don't handle it well, it could quickly go off the rails a little bit and be not okay. But I think it was really done well in this one, and very well explained and very well executed, where it didn't kind of come off as weird at all. So I think that that was a really positive part of the story, was kind of showing that dynamic between these two. And I just really liked the two characters, not as much as the previous Tessa Bailey book that I've read, which was Fix Her Up, but the main love interest in this book is like such an adorable character. I loved him. It's very much like a kind of a grumpy sunshine type relationship. So if you like that sort of thing, this might really work for you. This does get quite steamy. So if you prefer a closed door romance, this is not one I would recommend. This is very much wide open doors, all the way open. So it is quite steamy. But I think that Tessa Bailey does a good job with steamy scenes, so I really liked it. So this is one that I would highly recommend if you are looking for just a really cute, short, sweet Christmas type romance story. I know it's a little late to be giving this recommendation now, so when we come back around to Christmas next year, I'll bring this one back up and put it back on your radar, but I really enjoyed it and thought it was just what I needed. It was exactly what I was looking for. In the next book, actually, I'll go ahead and talk about this one because it's very similar to Window Shopping, where in A Holidaze by Christina Lauren, I was, again, in that same mood. I enjoyed, I think, this one a little bit more than Window Shopping. In A Holidaze has a very unique premise. It is following, well, I mean, not that unique, but unique for a Christmas story, I guess. It is following a girl who basically every year goes to this cabin with her family and her family friends that she's been close to all her life, and has this kind of Christmas get together in this little log cabin that's very cozy and atmospheric. And this year the Christmas get together just goes all wrong for her. She screws up multiple things, and on the way home wishes that she could redo it all and find happiness and whatever. So she gets stuck in a time loop where she's reliving the same vacation from the same day over and over and over again. And the universe is trying to steer her in the direction of what will make her happy. And I thought that that was so cute. It didn't drag on the time loop aspect too much. I was a little bit worried about that because I love a good time loop story, but I can see how if you're like dragging it on for a while, it gets a little old. So this one did just enough of it to make it a fun twist on the story, but not enough to take away from the rest of the story and the romance. And I just thought that the romance was so cute. It was so cute. And there was a little bit of like conflict that I thought was a little over dramatized, which is why it wasn't like the 5-star book, but I can forgive it because it was just so adorable, and by the end I was so happy with how it had all wrapped up, and I just loved it. I loved it. I loved our main character. I loved the main love interest. It was adorable, and it was very Christmassy. I will say this one wasn't quite as Christmassy as this one, so if you're really looking to go like all in on the Christmas atmosphere, this is the one I would recommend over Window Shopping. But oh my gosh, I really loved it. I've seen mixed reviews. I loved this. It totally worked for me. And then finally, the last book in this wrap-up is Traitor's Blade by Sebastian Castell. This is one I've had on my TBR for a very long time, and is one that I wanted to start this series so bad last year, and I waited until the last month to do it, but I did it. I started this series in 2022. This is a swashbuckling fantasy that follows our 4 main characters who are all greatcoats, which used to be this very prestigious position where you were essentially the most decorated, the most well-renowned kind of guard knight, if you will, in this kingdom. And they were since disgraced. Something happened where they lost all of their status, all of their popularity, and they're now kind of looked down upon. So it's not a great thing to be a greatcoat, and a lot of them are in hiding. So we're following kind of the remnants of some of these greatcoats who are still trying to bring justice to the world and still trying to do the right thing, even though everyone is expecting the worst from them. I loved the friendships and I loved the characters so much in this one. And I really, really like Sebastian de Castell's writing style. I found it very easy to fly through. It was a ton of fun, and I am not usually a huge fan of fight scenes, but I will say the way he wrote these sword fight scenes was the most compelling sword fighting I've ever read in any fantasy book. I was like, I had no idea that I was so into sword fighting until Traitor's Blade. I thought it was so well done. So the fight scenes were so much fun. I just found this a really good time. There is something that happens that I'm sure you've heard about if you've seen reviews of this one. There's something that happens in this book that's weird and out of place and does not need to be there. And I don't think anyone likes it. I've talked to my friends, no one likes it. But for me, it didn't ruin the rest of the book. I was still able to so much enjoy everything else about the book that, yeah, I was like, all right, that was kind of stupid and weird, but whatever. I like the rest of this book so much, I'll kind of forgive it and move on. So it didn't take away from the rest of the book for me. It was just kind of like this weird thing I had to read through. But the rest of the book was so much fun. I love the way that this one ended. It had some cool places that the characters ended up that makes me very excited for the sequel. So I'm so glad I finally got to this one. It was just as fun as I was hoping it would be, and can't wait to read more. I'm planning on reading Night's Shadow very, very soon. So hopefully I can get through this series pretty quickly this year. So those are all of the books that I read last year. So now we're totally caught up on my wrap-ups, and I will start my next wrap-up with all the books I read in January this month. So yay! Do you see any books that you read in this wrap-up that you have any thoughts on? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye!